Tenemos la siguiente charla del día que sigue tratando de abrirnos la cabeza y ayudarnos a visualizar cómo se ve el futuro. Esta charla está a cargo de, y dígame producción si puedo introducir la siguiente. No, hago tiempo un ratito más. Introduzco, ya. La siguiente charla está a cargo de Mitch Jafrey. Se llama El futuro está aquí, ¿ahora qué? ¿Cuáles son las señales que están redefiniendo el nuevo normal? Mitch es socia de IDEO, tiene más de 20 años de experiencia en diseño, se especializa en estrategias de diseño emocional y en habilitar el diseño de futuros centrados en las personas. Además, es licenciada en Psicología Cognitiva y Sociología y se enfoca en dinámicas sociales y conductuales y en la identificación de tendencias interculturales. So, welcome, Mitch. You can get to the stage.
Hello. That is the biggest name I've ever seen. I don't know if any of you have ever had this experience of standing under your name, but it's terrifying. So, hello. Hello. I come bearing gifts for you all. A little tasting menu, as we're calling it, of tomorrow. And of course, the word tasting menu is inspired by the brilliance of Peruvian cuisine. I mean, if I know anything about Peru, it's that the only trend of tomorrow is going to be Peruvian food taking the world by storm. So done, basically, talk done. So today, 9 little bites that are clusters of signals that can help us squint around the edges of time and peek at what's to come. But before we dig in, I actually want to give the mic back to all of you. So take a moment, scan this QR code, very fancy technology, and tell me what trends you're noticing. Your natural pattern spotting machine. So what are you seeing? What's exciting you? What's scaring you? Got 5 so far, hopefully more to come. Definitely Hi Mitch is the best of the set. 11, pandemics, remote work, greenwashing, that's a great one. Speed, ChatGPT, artificial intelligence. I feel like I don't need to do the talk. I mean, it's done. You know the trends of tomorrow. So hopefully most of these will be covered in those 9 clusters and we can dig in even further. But imagine, this is probably the first time as a company you all asked yourself this question and got to see everyone's responses all at once. Imagine if you did this every single Monday morning. All of Intercorp was asked to submit what are they seeing, what are they feeling, and the rule was you could not repeat a past answer. What would happen? How would it change how you create? How would it change what you make? Oh my God, any new ones? Okay, now people are just having fun with it. I'm cutting you off. I'm getting ahead of myself. I should introduce myself with an even bigger version of my name. Hello, I'm Mitch. And I need to start this talk by actually admitting something. Something difficult, something possibly dangerous for me to admit as the global design director of one of the world's largest design and innovation companies, IDEO. I hate the word innovation. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. It conjures brainstorm theater that ends at the Post-it, or innovation rooms with cheesy motivational posters or step-by-step design thinking formulas. That's it. I have the 5 steps. Now I'm super innovative. The end. This is not what wild and brave imagination feels like. This is not how futures are built. I think we need something a bit more like this. I mean, fundamentally new language, new methods, new tools that help unleash the creative electric energy of when we're inventing something new. So imagine, what if we all started over? What if we get rid of the word, it's a crappy word anyway, not innovation, but strategic rebellion. I was going to try to pronounce it. I feel like you all will mock me, so I will not do that. But just let that sink in for a minute. I showed this talk earlier to someone, and they said, it's a contradiction. Strategy is about logic. Rebellion is about breaking all the assumptions. How can you be strategically rebellious? But that's exactly it. How can you challenge the old norms, break industry expectations, question things that have never been questioned before, but do it strategically? I like to think of it as almost a rewilding of our imagination. I mean, Duncan talked about this before. We've become so set in our ways, how we think, what we think. Let ourselves be a little bit more wild about it. And if you'll indulge me, a little personal story about my own wildness as a little child. This is little baby Mitchell. I grew up in rural Vermont with hippie parents, and I was a very good girl, very obedient, good little mountain girl. But it was no surprise, of course, that all of my obedience as a child led to cliche teenage rebellion. I mean, pink hair, like ridiculous goth music, you name it. I was always mad at the man. Do you know this phrase, the man? Like, I don't even know if I knew who the man was, but he was the establishment. He wrote the systems of conformity. He designed how society is supposed to work. And it seemed preposterous to me. I mean, if you think back, can you remember the first time as a child when you asked, why? Like, why is it this way? Like, why do I have to sit in an auditorium silently with rows of chairs? Or why do we have 40-hour work weeks? Or wedding traditions? Or savings accounts? Or saying bless you? All of these things we made up. So much of what we do is the result of the odd and unconsidered continuing to do of what we've always done. And so having this realization as this 16-year-old little pink-haired punk felt like an epic awakening. Oh my God, we are just making it up. And we could have made up something different. And we still can. And so, of course, that led to the pink-haired punk of my youth turning into a designer at IDEO, working at the intersection of design and futuring, essentially creating new tomorrows that break all the old rules. And most recently, I've actually been living in Dubai, where I've been helping run and build a design innovation lab inside government. I mean, I heard Duncan ask you all earlier who thinks that they are in a company filled with regulations. Talk about government. But so having a design innovation lab that helped them become more future fit, helped them understand human-centered ways of working, transformed everything. And I know, well, I've been halfway around the world inventing the future. You have all been doing it here. I got just a little snippet of some of the amazing ones that hopefully you will all recognize. Rethinking education, finance, retail, you name it. The things that you are building are affecting the lives of millions of Peruvians. I mean, how rare, how extraordinary your position. The choices that you are making today are changing the future of an entire nation. And I don't say this lightly. This is not like part of a talk that I give all the time and then I always tell them they're important. You're legit very important. This is real. And so it all begs the question, what old rules will you break? Do you have a little pink-haired punk somewhere inside of you that's curious to break out of the old rules? Futuring invites us to escape the gravity of the present in pursuit of the possible. It liberates us from all of that baggage, like, oh, well, that's just the way it is, and invites us to ask, what if it wasn't? What if it wasn't? So today, 9 little clusters of new realities that are breaking old rules. 9 cultural ages. And by the way, at the end, you can take a photo now if you like. They are beautiful. Thank you, Stephanie Sizemore, for the illustrations. But at the end, I also will give you a QR code where you can download all of them with write-ups afterwards. So a cluster around tech futures, which I know many of you are thinking about, inclusive futures, and green futures. And first up, tech. Welcome to the age of the digital centaur. This is a moment where we will all become half human and half AI, literally fused together. I mean, imagine, what if you'll never be alone again, but not necessarily with another human? What happens if you could adopt an AI? What happens if you could marry one? What happens when your AI, who knows you better than you, decides what you're going to have for dinner, where you're going to go to school, maybe even who you date? There's been a rise recently of things like dating apps that let your AI avatars go on dates first to feel out if maybe the relationship is worth meeting up in person. Or Replica, this was an online site where over 200,000 people were paying to be able to have virtual relationships that were deeply meaningful to them. And when they recently removed the adult features, the company had to post a suicide hotline. Not a joke, because people were so depressed that a very, very important relationship had been taken away from them. And beyond dates and trying to find love, we are now trusting AI with our children. They're becoming teachers in the classroom, there are K-pop stars, there are influencers, and some of them literally are not even real. That is not a real person. That is not a real person. But it almost doesn't matter. It's not like we ever met Lindsay Lohan or whoever anyway, so why not let them be influencers? Why not? Oh, and this is a good one. Are you ready? I bet you've all heard of this. Hopefully it plays very loud. Oh, let me go back. Maestro. Yeah? Do you know this? Okay, bring it down. It was pretty loud, pretty good. This is not Drake. This is not The Weeknd. This is an AI version that took Drake and The Weeknd, mashed them together, and actually created more success than they did as human beings. Or you're seeing things like maybe $100,000 companies, 6 figures, being built in 2 weeks with AI companions. I mean, I'm convinced, I told Aurelia this yesterday, that this entire fest could literally just be called AI OMG, now what? That's it. That is the only thing that we will be talking about, I swear, for the next few years. But that's only one of 9, folks, so buckle in. We've got a few more to come. Welcome to the age of agency. With more and more accessible tools changing the way that people can create, it's fundamentally disrupting the relationship between consumers and corporations. So decentralized and bottom-up is going fully mainstream. Imagine within 5 years, let's say, what if every single corporation, your company, was a collective with the agreement that consumers were co-creators? You're already starting to see it. One of the biggest indicators of this is the platformization of industry giants. So Fortnite, for example, in a radical move, just allocated 40%, almost half of the money they make, to independent developers to be able to create on their platform and excite gamers. They basically said, we're not doing it. We're going to stay small and nimble. We're not growing our internal teams. We're going to build a fluid inner circle around us of collaborators and invite them into the mix. So essentially, it's no longer the big guys and the little guys, the Davids and the Goliaths. It's the Davids and the Goliaths collaborating, coming together. And many of the tools that are needed to actually create this decentralized bottom-up production are being built in Web3. And I know there's a talk happening later today. Please go to that around Web3. I'm not going to dig into the level of depth that it deserves. But suffice it to say, Web3 is essentially about cutting out the middleman entirely and disrupting power so that people own their own platforms. So, for example, Substack recently let all of the writers on the platform buy it. They own it themselves. It's like a hippie co-op almost. Or Zuzalu, fascinating, The tech elite, the tech glitterati, have decided that they are going to build an entire city from the bottom up. New infrastructure, new economies, new money, new leadership, new rules, new communication. And they popped it up in Montenegro, and they're literally building a city. No government. They are creating their own government. That is the age of agency. And you're seeing it play out in OG government too. So borders are being redrawn, relationships are changing, new alliances are being formed, entirely new currencies are now being created. Like the dynamics of power and how that might affect us in the coming years is going to be transformative. And interestingly, as much as you're seeing traditional groups join forces in new ways, you're also seeing people reject the entire idea of political boundaries. I mean, there's one that is arguing for the case of bioregions, where essentially areas that share environmental similarity might join up. Or the idea of network states, where I can belong to a nation digitally that actually I am not physically in at any point, a conceptual nation. Okay, last big shift in tech, the age of immortality. And this is not just immortality of our bodies, but our minds, our memories, what matters to us. Imagine, what if you were able to visit a loved one at a digital cemetery where you could meaningfully connect with them, laugh with them, confide in them, ask them questions. Everything about your life right now is being recorded. And it is entirely feasible that in the coming years, you won't be able to tell the difference between talking to someone on a Zoom call and talking to their digital twin. So what will that unlock? What happens when people can't die digitally? And how will that affect the relationships we have with each other, with the choices we make, the outfits we choose to wear that are being recorded and now will become part of my digital afterlife forever? Is there even the right to be forgotten, as some people are talking about? I mean, your data essentially becomes so important that it quite literally can take on a life of its own. And the age of immortality is not just limited to humans, but species, places. The island nation of Tuvalu has recently created a metaverse version of itself as the real-world country is sinking underwater. It's about to become extinct, and this is its only chance to stay. And last one, while this technically is not immortality, I just wanted to throw it in there. The advances in biotech are transforming how long we live and the quality of life that we're living. They're calling it the silver tsunami, which makes me very happy as I am in my mid-40s and on my way. So imagine wise brands are now paying just as much attention to the elders as they are to Gen Z, because these are people with money, with power, who are now renegotiating their relationships to love, to finance, to health, to education, you name it. The wave is coming. Okay, I know that was a lot. It was only the first section. We've got 3 to get through. But take a moment, let it sink in. Ask yourself these questions. With AI as the next internet, how could Intercorp or your company, however you're situated within it, rethink things like personalized virtual education? What does that unlock? Customer service, banking. How could your company become a platform? What would it be like to be a collective where you actually open up to allow consumers to co-create with you and other companies to become alliances? And then lastly, what services might your company tailor create for an extra long living society? And let's make it even a little bit more personal. Get the QR codes back. I want to see what hops, keep it G-rated. What's the one thing you would like a personalized AI to help you with? Personally, professionally, whatever you want. You're about to become a digital centaur, so what do you want it to do with you? Draft legal contracts. Love. Drive. Yeah, I mean, automated cars, of course. Mentor, time organization, taxes, investments, screening, thesis, oh my gosh, mental health. Insane, yes. It's coming, it's coming. Enjoy, enjoy. Next up, inclusive futures. How changing values and power dynamics and identities are essentially reshaping reality as we know it. First, personal favorite. Remember, I was a young kid who didn't want to be trapped in being told I had to be one thing. Welcome to the age of the shapeshifter. This is a moment where we always used to feel locked into these binaries. I have to be this thing or that thing, or have this career or that career. I have to make all these choices. You're being forced to place yourself on a spectrum as opposed to enjoy the dance between it. And the next generation is basically saying, nah, I'm good. I'm going to embrace the full spectrum. I want a multiplicity and a fluidity of self. So imagine, what if all of the old divides, male, female, married, single, this career, that career, digital, physical, all fell apart? They're gone. Those words are meaningless. I mean, the words digital, physical, this might be the last generation to even use those words. It will all be both. So, one of my favorite examples, I assume many of you have seen this, yeah? The movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. It was about the idea of living multiple lifetimes and how they all overlap. It is a perfect embodiment of the mashup moment that we're all finding ourselves in. It's almost as if in an era where nothing feels stable, climate, economy, you name it, we are recentering our own adaptability so that we can become fluid and move wherever we need to go. So lives are now lived in wildly distinct short chapters as opposed to a novel that makes sense start to finish. You could start over at 60. You have 2, 3, 4 different chapters of your career. You could have multiple partners at once. Monogamy is dying. I mean, even Stanford D School is considering the idea of, rather than a 4-year program, what would happen if we became a lifetime subscription? And you came back at key moments in your career where you needed a little boost. You would like to level up in some ways. And of course, unsurprisingly, along with that, all of the old boundaries of gender, of beauty, are blurring in beautiful, beautiful ways. Harry Styles just launched a genderless beauty line and nail polish line. I don't know if any of you saw the Met Gala photos from last night, but those boys looked beautiful in their pearls and their dresses. Brands like Adidas are even rethinking clothing sizes. So instead of having a men's section and a women's section, they have body sizes. Size 1, size 2, size 3. That's all you need. And you're also seeing the blurs in things like digital aesthetics influencing real-world fashion. So Mischief's big red boots that they called, I think the quote was, they free us from the constraints of reality, which I loved. Essentially blurring what it is to be digital, what it is to be physical, and the relationship between the two. And then finally, in a moment when it's almost too easy to make things look good, you've got generative AI, you've got templates to download, you name it, it's very, very easy to make something beautiful and clean and lovely. Of course, you're seeing a surprising pushback towards clash and chaos and mess and imperfection. So rather than curating our perfect selves like we used to do on Instagram, here's my beautiful holiday with my beautiful husband and my beautiful beach, instead, things like Be Real are taking over, where the youth are just allowing themselves a raw, uncensored peek into each other's life without any of the facade. And you're even seeing it in the politicians, leaders. So people like Jacinda are essentially saying, what if we peel back all of the layers? It's almost as if we're admitting that life is already too hard. Life is just too hard as it is. to also have to fake it, to have to put up that facade. So let's embrace the mess. Let's just be a human already. I love it. Which brings us to the age of recentering. Life success metrics are fundamentally changing. There's a rejection of burnout culture, of hustle mythology, in favor of balance and prioritizing your own values, your own well-being, your own wellness, as much as your productivity. So what if well-being is the new wealth? What if gross domestic happiness or gross domestic health replace GDP? That's the things that we rate nations on, and that's the thing we look for. We're seeing this pop up all over. I mean, memes on the death of girl boss aspirations. We all fought to get here, but now we're exhausted. China is seeing something called the lay flat movement, where essentially the next generation is saying, yeah, I'm good. It's too stressful, there's too much economic insecurity, climate change. I'm literally going to lie down and I'm not playing this game. South Korea is trying to bite back by paying people $500 a month to be able to leave their apartments because birth rates are declining, socialization is declining. We are depressed as hell. I mean, it is all pointing to mental health as the next big epidemic. Anxiety, depression, isolation. We're surprisingly seeing, as a result of that, the decline of alcohol. So the next generation does not drink as much. I don't know if you've all noticed this. And the rise of psychedelic healthcare. Something Peru certainly knows a little something about, so good job there, being first. Europe's first ketamine clinic just launched. Michael Pollan had an incredibly popular, I don't know if any of you saw it, Netflix series that basically normalized it. It said, this is not just for the hippies, this is for everyone. This is about our mental health. And even expressions of luxury are now changing in this age of self-care, where stealth wealth, as opposed to big, garish labels, are taking over. It's almost as if we're rebranding self-care as spirituality. And one of the weirdest, but I absolutely love it, weirdest examples is Dr. Bronner's. They're a soap company, and they've decided to transform their entire marketing budget, all of their investments, to funding psychedelic research, because they believe that caring for the soul and caring for the body must be one and the same. It's a soap company. It's fascinating. And finally, last one in inclusive design, the age of little bubbles. Reality is fragmenting, and we all can feel it. We're swimming like goldfish in these tiny little bubbles and not interacting with each other. It's almost as if we can choose the version of reality that we want to believe in, the belief system, you name it, the people, build our own bubble and never leave it. Never leave it. And it's beautiful in some ways because we're finding our people, we're finding connection, but it's suffocating curiosity. It's closing off our minds. I mean, an alternative title I considered for this was The Age of the Bully. What will life be like if there is no agreed upon collective reality? It's already happening. One of my favorite examples, unbelievable. Did any of you see this? It was the birds aren't real movement, essentially arguing that birds are really drones created by the US government to spy on Americans, and they recharge on power lines. Like, super brilliant, right? It blew up. People are following that, they're posting it, they're going to rallies. It accrued millions of human beings who are part of a conspiracy theory that birds aren't real. And then about a month in, the founder came out and said, guys, it's a joke. This is an art movement. I'm mocking the fact that we are living in such a post-truth world that I can make up something like birds aren't real, and you believe it? This is horrible. Whew. All right, sorry. It's almost as if While the outside world is in chaos, birds aren't real is happening, you name it, we're all retreating back to our pods. We're coming back to what we can control. The people we love, our communities, our neighborhoods, our values. I mean, you're seeing pod parents pop up their own micro schools because they don't believe in the system, eco communities, community clubs popping up like the ones in Chinatown that connect people based on shared last name. They're not even related. They just like the fact that that person has the same name as them. It's adorable. And of course, brands have known this forever. Brands are all about building a cult of belonging so that you have a sense of identity in this safe little bubble that feels true to what you believe. And this is all connected to a sense of rising local pride. The old globalization game of the West dominates all, everyone has to do what the West does, is crumbling. It's crumbling. It's pushing back against, everybody is pushing back with essentially anti-colonialist aesthetics, anti-colonialist values, and saying, look, we have been quieted for too long, and guess what? Our voices matter too. I have loved seeing the Middle East, where I've lived for the last 5 years, start to proudly reclaim their own story, their own narrative, focus on their own cultural exports, as opposed to just being a place that takes from the West and hopes that it will be good. Even phrases you all know, like made in China, luxury brands are now taking back that phrase to say, you know what, right, made in China, that's right. I am part of a movement that is reclaiming our heritage as made in China, and you're gonna think differently about China. More than ever, the world is craving homegrown brands and stories they can associate with their own identity. Okay, I know these are all fire hoses. Thank you for tolerating them and then having little breaks in between, but hopefully it's fun. So ask yourself, in an era of fluid identity, are basic personas useless? I mean, how does this change how people shop? With a rising emphasis on well-being, how might your company expand its offerings to fully recenter wholeness and wellness? And as communities divide into echo chambers, what role will you play in shaping beliefs, in shaping values, and shaping quote-unquote truths? Okay, your turn. Phone time again. What is something that your parents had a hard time accepting about your lifestyle? Or, if you prefer, what's something that is freaking you out about the trends I just shared in the next generation? Ooh, yes, got some queers in the house. Tattoos, open relationships, sexual freedom, divorce, not having kids. Yeah, that's a huge one, by the way. Understood. Yeah. The same way you freaked your parents out, the next generation is freaking you out. Get over it. Let them have it. All right, and finally, green futures. No surprise. The same way I said AI is going to change everything, the second half of that sentence would be, and also climate is changing everything. And sustainability must be the new norm of every single thing we do. Welcome to the age of alchemy. What if you could transform matter and energy effortlessly? If ancient alchemy was about turning everything into gold, now we're trying to turn everything into dirt. You're seeing this with houses being built with mycelium bricks, brands like Pangea that are basically a front for a material science lab with all of the biomaterials they're using, and algae-based plastics that are going to fundamentally replace the packaging industry as we know it. It's as if we're finally remembering the universal law of nature, that matter cannot be destroyed, matter cannot be created, matter can only be transformed. So it's time to focus on transformation. And another interesting transformation is seen as renewable energy is becoming more and more prominent, currents are becoming currencies. interesting implications like communities trading energy with each other, decentralized grids, new mediums of travel, even this amazing one, the Ford F-150 truck, electric truck. There was a blizzard in Texas, and all of the F-150 owners used their truck to power their house. Fascinating. That is a new form of energy becoming currency, becoming value. And perhaps the most literal example, weird but awesome, is energy alchemy that IKEA is now pushing, where they're essentially inviting people to quite literally pay with their time. They're offering discounts for however long it took you to get somewhere and however much fuel it took you to get somewhere. And then the last two, bringing us home, the age of the phoenix. You know the story of the phoenix, right? Like it lifts up, it falls, it lifts up again. What would it be like to think in terms of long-term profitability as opposed to just short-term, one-cycle-based profit? What if everything was designed to rise and then to fall and then to peak again? Could we reframe abundance as the ability to regenerate? So it's not just one time. It's not, one of the metaphors I love is, it's not just about being the tallest tree, as big as I can get. It's about having the widest trunk so that I can withstand anything that can come because I am strong as hell. So imagine, what if we start thinking about our businesses as perennials? What if we think about them the same way we do with farming and gardening, where you rotate crops through it? You let the soil rest at some point. You know that spring is going to bring something new, so you're okay with the occasional winter. I mean, the tech bros, of course, in their brilliance, have decided to even rename the idea of a down market. To them, it's not a down market, it's a crypto winter. And so don't worry, it's going to come back and it's going to be beautiful. A little annoying because they're a little annoying, but it is an interesting reframe if you start to expand how you're thinking across centuries, not just quarters. Thinking and acting this way is sometimes referred to as green swan efforts. And I feel like we're going to start hearing this more and more. It's essentially building systems of resilience to allow you to overcome all of the different market changes, economic, climate, you name it, and be part of the next wave, not just the current wave. Annie's best mac and cheese of all time, I assume you have it in Peru. If not, get yourself some, it's amazing, is a beautiful example. So they've started investing in regenerative agriculture, where essentially toiling the soil makes it better than what they took out of it. And you're even seeing it in things like regenerative economics. So, whoa, all right, walk back this way. Regenerative economics is the idea that rather than maximizing profits in a single business, you're going to prioritize profits and value over time. You're going to keep it in the system and keep it feeding itself. So a beautiful example is a currency called Oak, recently launched in the city of Oakland, California. And it allows residents and local businesses to trade money together, support each other, but then a certain percent of all of the profits that are happening through Oak, they choose together what they want to invest in the community. So all the money stays with each other, and then all of the profits also help uplift everybody around them. And we did it, we're almost there, last stage, which I realized is moderately ironically titled to call something the age of the unborn. But let's go with it, the age of the unborn. What happens if we think in centuries, designing for those who don't exist yet? Might forests have wallets where they're more valuable alive than they are as timber? We're seeing this increase in generational thinking. Products, governments, companies, you name it, are essentially thinking about how can we be great grandparents? How will we look back? How will people look back on the choices we're making today and say, thank you, you did this for me? Patagonia, you probably all saw, recently announced that Earth is its only shareholder. Only shareholder. It exists to help the Earth. And the brilliant Sophie Howe, I met in Dubai during my government time there, is often nicknamed the Minister of the Unborn, Her official title is that she's the Future Generations Commissioner for Wales, but everyone just calls her the Minister of the Unborn. And she's on a tear. I mean, she's launching policies, programs, you name it. What happens when you are a voice for those who have yet to come? And the connection to long-termism is also having some interesting overlaps with religion. So there's a sect of Nepalese nuns who have formed a group to practice kung fu and what they call extreme acts of environmental advocacy. So essentially, multi-day walks to pick up trash or month-long bike rides to advocate for green travel in the midst of doing kung fu and being total badasses. Extinction Rebellion is basically climate church that everyone's going to. Nations are starting to give rights to their land, to their lakes, to their mountains, official rights. And VR is allowing you to feel what it's like to be inside a tree as it's being burned. All of this is forging a new relationship between us very emotionally, very spiritually, and nature around us, fundamentally changing it. But while our climate aspirationalism is strong, of course we want to help the planet, we want to buy green, we want to be very, very good. The reality is our daily actions often contradict our beliefs. And there's a reason why affordable fashion brand Shein, maybe you all know this, terrifying, the world's top clothing retailer. And this $20 Uniqlo bag, the top selling item of the entire year of any product, of any brand, of alt. And said quite simply, our slim wallets are winning out. They're winning out over our values. And so until it becomes affordable for us to be circular and for us to be sustainable, we are in for a never-ending tug of war. And it's not fair to put this on the consumers. I mean, the people who can change this are the corporations, are the governments with new industry-wide systems. So the truth is, giants like Intercorp, we are literally in your hands now. We can't do this by ourselves. We're just going to keep buying crappy Shein and Uniqlo because it's all we can afford. Okay, last set of questions. Ask yourself, if nature was a new stakeholder, literally a shareholder, how would that change your balance sheet? What would unlock if you thought more intentionally around green assets, green materials designed for decomposition? With regenerative systems, what parts of your business could be designed to rise and fall and be reborn cyclically, like a garden where you're planting fresh every season? And finally, if your great-great-great-great-grandchild was literally sitting at your next meeting, how would that change your decisions? If you had to look them in the eye as you are making a decision, how would that change? What's the one thing that you wish your ancestors had done differently that would have fundamentally changed Peru? Oh, corruption, pride in the culture. It's coming. Education. Education. This is your new job. This is how you become a good ancestor. Okay. We're done. We made it. Time to take a breath. I know that was a lot. A new reality is being shaped by all of these new forces, and it is time for you to enter the ring. Do not try to consume the future. Be part of creating it. One more last one. I am super curious. Hopefully this was moderately inspiring. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? What's one thing that you would go back to work on Monday and say, oh, I actually might think about this project a little differently, or this partnership, or this AI integration that we've been thinking about but we're not investing in yet? I guess the answer is Brian. Create my own school. Undo. Undo is great. I love that. Think green. Quit and save the world. Sorry. There's some ayahuasca in there for sure. Rethink my job, my projects, my sustainability, work in digital financial literacy, show up more intentionally. Write a book. Wow. Please do it. Please do it. And if you forget everything else I said, just remember this. Someone made it all up. Someone made all this up. And you can make it up again. And you can do it with more heart. You can do it with more beauty. You can do it with more bravery. It's time for a rewilding of our collective imaginations. It's time to question it all. It's time to build it again. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new sights, but in looking with new eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Now, we have a couple of questions.
Okay.
You can send wherever you prefer. There's a particularly good one from the audience, and it is, as young people in our companies, how can we bridge the division between our vision and that of older people with more seniority and power?
I love it. This is the question of power. This is the question of a voice at the table. This is the question of visibility of your concerns being taken seriously. I can only speak from what I've experienced at IDEO, but we essentially built out different working groups. So we're calling them employee resource groups. There's one for Latin Pride. There's one for our queers community. There's one for people who want to advocate about green elements in our projects. And those people have their own space to build teams, come together, build initiatives, and work with leadership to make them happen. So it's a structural thing. It's not just knock on the door and hope you're let in. You need to be able to build the systems that invite people to be let in.
Awesome. And in that line, futuring seems kind of like a privilege in an organization. You know, if I'm just an assistant, probably I won't be thinking about the future and things. So how would you advise us to incorporate futuring as part of the culture of our companies?
Yeah, no, I love it. But this is what I think is the myth. There's this myth that futuring is for these special people who sit in the corner and then they see signals and then they invent the new things. We are literally all seeing the future every day in everything we are doing, in signals coming at us. So at minimum, if you could build a platform to aggregate those words, you could do it like this. You could literally have every Monday, what signals are you seeing? And then inspired by that, every week say, interesting, how might we integrate that into this next product launch we're gonna do, or this next that? You also see, which I think Tom will talk about at Adidas, people building entire divisions that are not just siloed on the side to be able to be the futurists who come up with the things, but that are porous parts of the system that invite people in to create new things with them and then breed out from that new ways of thinking, new policy, whatever, you name it. So there's something to be said for a center of excellence almost that owns it, but then there's also something to be said for literally every one of you knowing that you're a futurist and doing it.
Cool. And finally, you have a very optimistic vision of the future, you know, like 9 awesome scenarios where, I don't know, things are just better.
I mean, I'm terrified too.
Yeah, but probably they can also be worse.
Yeah.
So why is it important for us to, and for the leaders at Intercorp, to actually take the time to imagine the future, and so that can help us shape it, you know?
Right. I think you're right. So someone told me once that I was very optimistic, and I thought it meant that I was very like clappy happy, oh yay, everything's gonna be okay. And they said, no, the actual definition of optimism is belief in your own power. Belief that you can do something different, you can adopt. So I'm gonna be optimistic because I can do it. I can be a part of this. And so I think there's like a mindset shift of knowing that No one's coming to save you. No government mandate is suddenly going to fix climate or you name it. Not here, not anywhere. But you are the people who will be creating the things that can change it.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one last question. Kate, are we good? Okay, one last question. One last question? Yes? Okay. So we have seen a lot of trends here, but maybe for us in Peru and for all the people living in the global south, this might seem a bit like far-fetched. So what do you think are the main the main one or two trends that are more relevant for Peru or for the global south?
I mean, if I had to pick two, which would be the same everywhere, it's AI and green strategies. Like remembering that we will fundamentally work in new ways, we all can, and that we need to take account of nature as our key stakeholder, 100%. If all we do, if you ignore everything else and only focus on those two, you'll be successful. That's good.
Thank you so much. Ella fue Mitch Jafrey. Thank you, Mitch.